Elara was 10 years old, and her whole world felt a little bit gray. It had been that way since her grandfather passed away a few months ago. He was her best friend. While her parents worked, she spent afternoons at his cozy house, where the biggest excitement was watching dog show competitions on his old television. He would point at the screen, his voice warm and scratchy, explaining the moves. "See that, my little fox? That's a perfect heel. Teamwork, that's what it is. Pure teamwork." Her grandfather wasn't just a fan. He was a retired police officer, and his partner for years was a serious-looking German shepherd named Axel. Axel lived with him, a quiet shadow with a noble face and a few faint scars lining his muzzle stories her grandfather would only hint at. When her grandfather died, he left Axel in Elara's care. "He needs a good heart," the will had said, "and she's got the best one." The idea came to her one rainy afternoon. She was flipping through one of her grandfather's old dog-eared show magazines. A small, brightly colored flyer fell out. It was for a community family fun dog showcase, happening the next weekend in the city park. It wasn't the big fancy show on TV, but it had categories like Best Trick and Owner Dog Lookalike. A little spark, the first she'd felt in weeks, flickered in her chest. This, she thought, asterisk for Grandpa. For Axel. Asterisk, she emptied her piggy bank, counting and recounting the coins and crumpled bills. It was just enough for the entry fee. For their costume, she found 2 matching blue bandanas in her mother's sewing box. She ironed one carefully for herself and tried to iron the other, but the steam made wrinkles, and a small brown burn mark appeared in one corner. It would have to do. Axel watched her, his head tilted, as she practiced the simple routine she'd planned. Walk, stop, heel, sit. He followed every command perfectly, but his movements were efficient, powerful, not the flashy, prancing steps of the show dogs they watched online. The day of the showcase was sunnier than expected. The park was buzzing with people and their pets. Elara's stomach was full of butterflies as she led Axel on his leash. He walked beside her, calm and steady, but his eyes constantly scanned the crowd, a habit from his old job. They stood out immediately. All around them were dogs that looked like they'd just stepped out of a salon poodle's with perfect pom-poms, glossy spaniels with ribboned top knots, and small, fluffy dogs that fit in purses. Axel, with his working dog build and serious expression, looked like a soldier at a tea party. Elara felt her confidence shrinking. She tried to smooth her wrinkled bandana. A woman nearby, holding a tiny, powder-puff dog with a perfect pink bow, looked Axel up and down. She leaned toward another woman with a similar dog. "Some entries are certainly interesting this year," she said, her voice a little too loud. "It takes a certain discipline, you know. Not just any old dog can do it." Her friend nodded, glancing at Elara's homemade outfit. Elara's cheeks burned. She looked down at Axel, who was sitting patiently by her side, ignoring everything but her. She buried her fingers in the thick fur of his neck, taking a small comfort. "It's okay, boy," she whispered more to herself than to him. "We know what we can do." But the doubt was a heavy stone in her pocket. The spark she'd felt was growing dim, threatened by the polished perfection all around them and the sharp, unkind words hanging in the air. The line to check in at the registration table felt like it went on forever. Elara held Axel's leash tight in her sweaty hand. All around her, people were laughing and chatting. Dogs yapped excitedly. She heard bits of conversation that made her feel even smaller. Words like gait and stacking and professional handler floated past her. She didn't know what those meant. Her plan was just to walk nicely and do the things her grandfather had taught Axel. Finally, it was their turn. A friendly older man with a clipboard smiled at her. "And who do we have here?" "This is Axel," Ilara said, her voice coming out in a squeak. She cleared her throat. "We're in the beginner obedience round." The man looked down at Axel, whose eyes were fixed on the man's clipboard, watching it like it might be a threat. "He's a serious fellow, isn't he? A working dog?" "He was a police dog," Ilara said, feeling a tiny prick of pride. "Well, good luck to you both," the man said, handing her a number on a plastic clip. It was number 42. She fumbled with it, her fingers clumsy, before finally managing to pin it to her shirt. The plastic feeling stiff and awkward, they found a quiet spot of grass under a big oak tree to wait. Ilara tried to practice the routine. "Axel, heel," she whispered. He moved perfectly into position at her left side, his shoulder in line with her leg. "Good boy, sit." He sat, straight and alert. It was perfect, but it felt so plain. From the main ring, she could see a fluffy white dog jumping through a hoop to cheerful music and loud applause. Her heart sank. Their routine had no hoops, no music. It was just them, walking together. The time came. A lady's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Contestant number 42, please come to the ring for beginner obedience." This was it. Ilara stood up, her legs feeling like jelly. Axel stood up with her, giving his whole body a quick shake, from his nose to the tip of his tail. It was like he was getting ready for work. That simple, familiar action gave her a tiny bit of courage. She took a deep breath. "Okay, Axel, for Grandpa." Walking from the shady grass into the open ring felt like stepping onto a stage under a giant spotlight. The sun seemed brighter here. The eyes of the crowd, sitting on folding chairs and standing along the rope fence, all seemed to be on her. She could see the woman with the powder-puff dog watching. A small smile on her face. In the center of the ring stood the judge, a woman with a kind face and a sun hat. She gave Ilara a warm nod. "You may begin when you're ready, dear." Ilara's mind went blank for a second. She could feel the silence waiting for her. Then she remembered the first step. "Axel, heel." Her voice was thin and trembly in the open air. But Axel heard her. He fell into step beside her, his walk a steady, powerful march next to her uncertain steps. They did a slow circuit around the edge of the ring. So far, so good. Next was the halt. She stopped walking. "Axel, sit." He dropped into a perfect sit, looking straight ahead, not at her. A good sign, her grandfather had said. It meant he was focused. Now came the tricky part her grandfather had called the recall. She had to walk 10 feet away, turn, and call Axel to come. Her mouth felt dry. She walked away from him, counting the steps in her head. When she turned, he was just a silhouette sitting tall in the bright sun. She bent her knees a little, the way she'd practiced in the backyard, and tried to put a happy, commanding tone in her voice. "Axel, come." He launched forward like a shot, coming to a precise stop right in front of her. Relief washed over her. It was going okay. The final part was the finish, where he had to go from sitting in front of her to sitting neatly at her side. She gave the command. He started to move, but in her excitement, she remembered the little liver treats in her pocket, a reward for a job well done. As she reached for one, her elbow bumped her other arm, and a whole handful of small brown treats went flying out of her pocket. They scattered on the grass like birdseed. A titter of laughter rippled through the audience. Someone giggled. "Oops!" Ilara's face exploded in heat. She felt frozen, staring at the stupid treats on the ground. She'd messed it up. She'd ruined their perfect run with her clumsiness. The shame was instant and crushing, hotter than the sun on her neck. Flustered, she rushed through the last command. "Heel," she said, her voice choked. Axel, confused by her sudden panic, but ever obedient, completed the move and sat at her side. The applause from the crowd was soft polite and over quickly. It was the kind of clapping you give to someone when you feel a little sorry for them. Tears stung the back of Alara's eyes. She couldn't look at the judge. She couldn't look at the kind-faced woman under the sun hat. She just mumbled a "thank you" to the ground and hurried out of the ring, pulling Axel with her. The walk back to their oak tree felt 1,000,000 miles long. She heard the announcer call the next number, a border collie named Sky with a fantastic frisbee routine. The crowd's excited murmur felt like a wall pushing her away. She sank onto the grass, hiding her face against Axel's neck. He didn't lick her or whine. He just sat solidly, letting her lean on him, a warm, steady wall of fur. She had been so sure this would be a way to feel close to her grandfather again. Instead, she just felt stupid and small. She had wanted to show everyone Axel's greatness, and all she had shown them was a girl who couldn't even keep treats in her pocket. For a long time, Alara just stayed under the oak tree, her face buried in Axel's fur. The cheerful noise of the dog show felt like it was coming from another planet. She could hear the happy barks, the bursts of applause, the upbeat music from the agility ring. It all just made her feel worse. She replayed the moment in her head over and over, the treats flying, the sound of laughter, the hot rush of shame. She had let Axel down. She had let her grandfather's memory down. Axel finally shifted, nudging her gently with his wet nose. He let out a quiet, low whine, not of sadness, but of question. Asterisk, what's next? It seemed to say. He was a dog of duty. Sitting still for too long wasn't in his nature. Alara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek. She looked at him. His intelligent brown eyes watched her patiently. There was no disappointment in them, no judgment. He was just waiting for her to tell him what to do. That simple loyalty made her feel a tiny bit better. You were perfect, she whispered to him, scratching behind his ear the way he liked. It was me. I got scared. She knew they should probably just go home. But something stubborn inside her, maybe a little piece of her grandfather's spirit, wouldn't let her leave yet. She hadn't come here to win a ribbon, not really. She had come to honor a great dog. Leaving now, slinking away with her tail between her legs, felt like the wrong ending to their story. Come on, she said, standing up and brushing grass from her knees. Let's at least watch. They found a spot at the back of the crowd, away from the main ringside seats. They watched a hilarious contest for waggiest tail, which made Alara crack a small smile. They saw a tiny, fluffy dog wearing a superhero cape. It was easier to watch from the shadows, where no one was looking at them. The main event was coming up, the Agility Championship for the more experienced dogs. The crowd's energy was building. People were getting sandwiches and drinks from a small refreshment tent set up near the edge of the field. The tent was bustling. A man was using a small motorized golf cart to bring big bags of ice and boxes of soda from a truck parked nearby. He'd zip back and forth, the cart's little electric motor whining under the weight. Alara was watching a beautiful black and white collie fly through a tunnel when she heard a new sound, a sharp shout. Her eyes flicked toward the tent. The man with the golf cart had been lifting a heavy cooler. As he pushed it off the cart, his foot must have slipped on the pedal. The event happened in a horrible, slow-motion silence at first. The cart, now free of the cooler's weight, suddenly lurched backward. The man stumbled, tried to grab it, and was thrown hard to the ground. The cart didn't stop. It jerked, then shot forward, its little motor now a high-pitched scream. It wasn't driving in a straight line. It was swerving, curving sharply, heading directly for the crowd of people gathered near the tent entrance. It was a scene of frozen panic. A mother holding a baby turned, her mouth a perfect O of horror. An older couple, too slow to move, stood paralyzed. And right in the cart's wild, swerving path was the woman with the powder-puff dog, who was now crouched down, trying to pick up her small daughter who had dropped her toy. Time seemed to stop. Elara's breath caught in her throat. She saw the man on the ground, clutching his knee. She saw a security guard start to run, but he was too far away. It was all going to happen too fast. The cart would plow into that group of people in just a couple of seconds. And then a change came over the dog beside her. Axel had been sitting calmly, watching the show. But the second the shout rang out, his whole body stiffened. His ears, which had been relaxed, snapped forward, hard as leather. His head went up. His eyes, usually so soft when they looked at Elara, became sharp, focused lenses. He was no longer looking at the collie in the ring. He was tracking the cart. His nose twitched, taking in the scent of hot electric motor, of fear from the crowd. A deep, rumbling vibration started in his chest, not a bark of alarm, but a sound of pure, intense concentration. Elara felt the leash go tight in her hand. He wasn't pulling to run away. He was leaning forward, every muscle in his powerful body coiled like a spring. He was assessing, calculating the speed, the angle, the threat. This was not a trick. This was not a game. This was what he was born to do. This was the ghost of his old life, rising to the surface in an instant. The crowd's frozen silence broke into screams and shouts. People were scrambling, but it was chaos. The cart wobbled, one wheel hitting a bump in the grass, which sent it veering even more directly toward the little girl. And in that moment of sheer terror, Elara's own fear vanished. The shame from the ring was gone. Her mind was clear. She wasn't a clumsy little girl anymore. She was Axel's partner. She saw what he saw. She understood what he was preparing to do. Her voice, when it came out, didn't tremble. It was clear, loud, and firm, just like her grandfather's used to be. It was a single word, a command he had known for years, drilled into him for moments of crisis. Asterisk, asterisk, A-X-E-L, halt. Asterisk, asterisk. It wasn't a shout of panic. It was an order, a release. The word halt cut through the noise like a knife. The moment the command left Elara's lips, Axel moved. It wasn't the joyful, bounding run of a dog chasing a ball. It was a burst of pure, directed power. He became a black and tan streak across the green grass, his leash flying loose from Elara's hand. The distance between the oak tree and the runaway cart was maybe 50 yards. Axel covered it in what felt like the blink of an eye. His legs pumped, low and driving, eating up the ground. The crowd screams pitched higher, now mixed with cries of, "The dog! Look at the dog!" The golf cart was a clumsy, unpredictable thing. It wobbled and jerked, its front wheels turned at a sharp angle. It was heading straight for the woman and her daughter, who were now frozen, hugging each other on the ground. The little fluffy dog had run off, yipping in terror. Axel didn't aim for the people. He didn't try to get between them and the cart that would have meant getting crushed. Instead, his old training took over. He was intercepting the threat. He angled his run, calculating the cart's swerving path with a cool intelligence that seemed almost human. He aimed for the front right wheel. Just as the cart was about to reach the huddled figures, Axel put on a final incredible burst of speed. He didn't bark. He didn't snarl. He was utterly silent, a focused missile. He threw his shoulder, the strong muscle and bone of it, directly into the cart's wheel well. There was a heavy, metallic thump crunch that made everyone nearby flinch. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a full-bodied, powerful impact. The cart, which probably weighed several 100 pounds, shuddered violently. The force of Axel's hit, combined with its own wobbly momentum, changed its course. It was only a few degrees, but it was enough. The cart veered sharply to the left. It missed the woman and her daughter by less than the length of a person's arm. Its whining motor screamed as it shot past them, now heading for an open, grassy area away from the crowd. It hit a small, gentle slope, slowed, and finally bumped to a harmless stop against a line of thick, planted shrubs. For 2 whole seconds, there was absolute, dead silence. Then, the world exploded into sound. The woman was sobbing, clutching her daughter, who was also crying in shock. The man with the hurt knee was hobbling over, his face pale. People were rushing forward, talking all at once. "Did you see that? That dog saved them." He jumped right at it. But Elara wasn't hearing any of it. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. Her eyes were fixed on one thing only: Axel. He had landed roughly from the impact. He had rolled once, then gotten back to his feet. He stood now, a little apart from the gathering crowd, shaking his whole body from nose to tail again, as if shaking off the shock. Then he turned. He didn't go to the people he had saved. He didn't bask in the attention. He looked across the field, his eyes searching, until they found Elara. He trotted back to her, his gait steady, his tongue lolling out a bit. He stopped in front of her and sat, looking up at her face as if to say, "Task complete." Elara fell to her knees in the grass. Her hands flew over him, checking his shoulder, his legs, his side. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She murmured, her voice thick with tears, but these were tears of a different kind. She felt his shoulder where he'd hit the cart. It was wet with his saliva from where he'd licked it, but she couldn't find any blood, any cuts. He leaned into her touch, giving her hand a small, reassuring nudge with his nose. The bubble of quiet around them was broken by the sound of running feet. The event organizer, a man with a walkie-talkie and a look of total shock on his face, rushed over. He was followed by the judge in the sun hat, her face pale. Several other people crowded around, but they kept a respectful distance, staring at Axel with awe. "Young lady," the organizer said, his voice shaky. He bent down, putting himself at her level. "Are you all right? Is your dog hurt?" I think he's okay," Elara said, her arm wrapped tightly around Axel's neck. She was trembling now, the adrenaline starting to fade. The security guard who had been running arrived, panting. The cart secure. No one else is hurt. That was incredible. He looked at Axel with pure respect. The woman who had been in danger had gotten to her feet, still holding her daughter. People were offering her water, asking if she needed an ambulance. She waved them off gently. Her eyes, red from crying, were locked on Elara and Axel. Slowly, she walked toward them. Her daughter's hand clutched tightly in her own. The crowd, sensing something important was happening, grew quiet again. All the fun of the dog show had stopped. Every single person was watching this little girl and her German shepherd. The woman stopped a few feet away. She looked at Axel, who watched her calmly. Then she looked at Elara. Her earlier expression of cool superiority was completely gone. It was replaced by something raw and real gratitude, and a deep, deep shame. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out at first. She tried again. She began, her voice a hoarse whisper. She swallowed. "My daughter, you." She couldn't seem to form the sentence. Instead, she let go of her daughter's hand, took one step forward, and simply bent at the waist in a deep, sincere bow of her head. When she straightened, tears were streaming down her face. "Thank you," she finally managed, the words clear and strong. "Your dog. He saved my little girl's life." Elara just held onto Axel tighter. She didn't know what to say. All she could do was nod. The organizer stood up, looking around at the silent, watching crowd. He had the loudspeaker microphone still in his hand from announcing the contests. He cleared his throat, and his voice, when it came out, echoed softly across the suddenly still park. "I think," he said, his tone filled with emotion, "we have all just witnessed what a real hero looks like. And it has nothing to do with ribbons or perfect routines." The organizer's words hung in the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, a single person started to clap. It was a slow, steady sound. Then another person joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire park was filled with the sound of applause. It wasn't the polite, quick clapping from the obedience ring. This was loud, sustained, and full of real emotion. People were on their feet, their faces showing amazement and respect as they looked at the girl and her dog. Alara stood up, her legs still a little wobbly. Axel stood beside her, panting softly, his eyes scanning the crowd when his body relaxed against her leg. He seemed to understand the applause wasn't a threat, but he wasn't interested in the fame. He was just staying close to her. The organizer, his voice gentle, spoke into the microphone again, directing his words to Alara. "Young lady, what is your name?" She looked up, the sound of her own heartbeat loud in her ears. "Alara," she said, and her voice, amplified by the microphone, sounded much braver than she felt. "And this incredible dog?" "This is Axel." "Axel," the organizer repeated, letting the name settle over the crowd. "Can you tell us, Alara, what we just saw? That was more than just a fast dog. That was something trained." Alara looked down at Axel. She thought of her grandfather, of the stories he told only in whispers, of the deep bond between a handler and their partner. She took a deep breath. The shame from earlier was gone, melted away by Axel's courage. Now she felt only a swelling pride, not for herself, but for him. She leaned toward the microphone the man offered. He was a police dog," she said, her voice growing stronger. "My grandfather was his handler. He trained him to protect people, to assess situations and act." She gestured weakly toward the now still golf cart. "He wasn't trying to hurt the cart. He was trying to redirect it, to change its path. That's what he was taught to do with a threat." A murmur of understanding rippled through the audience. The scars on Axel's muzzle, the serious look in his eyes, it all made sense now. He wasn't just a pet. He was a veteran. The woman who had been in danger stepped forward again, her daughter clinging to her leg. The organizer handed her the microphone. She looked directly at Alara, her eyes still glistening. "Earlier today," the woman began, her voice trembling but clear, "I said something unkind. I judged you and Axel by how you looked, and not by what was inside. I was wrong. So completely wrong." She looked out at the crowd, then back at Alara. "You have a magnificent partner, and you have my family's eternal gratitude. You saved us." The crowd applauded again, softer this time, touched by the raw honesty of the moment. The organizer nodded thoughtfully. "This event is supposed to celebrate the bond between dogs and their people," he announced. "We give out ribbons for the waggiest tail, the best trick, the perfect heel." He paused. "But I think we all agree that today we saw the greatest demonstration of that bond possible. A bond of trust, of training, and of sheer, selfless bravery." He turned and said something to an assistant, who hurried off toward the prize table. The organizer walked over and picked up a large satin ribbon from the table. It was a deep royal blue, meant for best in show. But with a smile, he took a thick black marker from his pocket. He turned his back to the crowd for a moment, writing on the back of the ribbon. Then he turned around. "We don't have a category for what Axel did today," he said. "So we're making one." He walked over to Alara and knelt down. He didn't try to pin the ribbon on Axel. Instead, He handed it carefully to Alara. "This is for both of you." Alara took it. The satin felt cool and smooth. She turned it over. On the back, in big, clear letters, the man had written, "****, for exceptional courage and the true heart of a hero." ***, tears finally spilled over, running down her cheeks, but they were happy tears, tears of pride. She showed the words to Axel. He sniffed the ribbon curiously, then gave her hand a lick. The rest of the afternoon felt like a dream. People didn't stare at them with pity or judgment anymore. They approached with smiles, asking if they could pet Axel, thanking him, asking Alara quiet questions about her grandfather. Axel accepted the attention with a calm dignity, always staying close to Elara. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Alara knew it was time to go home. She clipped the leash back onto Axel's collar. They walked together across the grass, past the now empty rings, toward the park gate. She felt different. The gray feeling that had clung to her since her grandfather's death wasn't gone, but it had a golden light shining through it. She had felt close to him today, not in a sad way, but in a powerful one. She had been his partner's handler, if only for one moment. She had given the command, and Axel had trusted her completely. She looked down at the dog walking steadily beside her. He wasn't a show dog. He would never have a perfect, prancing gait or a fluffy, styled coat. His trophies were the faint scars on his face and the new, smudged writing on a satin ribbon. But as they walked out of the park, the noise of the day fading behind them, Alara knew the truth with a quiet, certain joy. Her grandfather hadn't left her just a dog. He had left her a hero. And together, they hadn't just left a dog show. They had left everyone there speechless, remembering what real greatness looked like. It didn't come from a ribbon. It came from a loyal heart, a brave act, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her best friend.